This week's parsha deals with the death of Sarah and Avram's necessity to bury her in the patriarchal tomb, which is in Hebron. And then we come to the second story, which we're going to focus all our attention today, is Avram is getting older and he has to find a wife for Yitzchak. And your handout has the relevant psukim, not all of the psukim, but quite a few of them. As a matter of fact, almost all of them in the first page and on the second page. And you notice I have a bunch of underlines and circles and things because there's a lot of things we're going to have to pay attention to. I don't know if we're going to be able to do all of them, but the story today we're going to focus on is the mission of Eliezer, the trusted servant of Avram, who was sent to Haran to find a wife for Yitzchak. So he is sent to the home of Besuel, and he has to find a wife. That's the story we're going to be learning. Now, the story, I'm not going to have time to go through every verse, but the first 30 verses or so tells us the story. The first 30 verses tells us the story. And basically, Avram tells Eliezer, find a wife for my son Yitzchak. Do not take a wife from the land of Canaan. Canaanite women are not acceptable to my son. You're going to have to leave Canaan and go to Haran, my birthplace, to find a wife over there. And just focus on verse 5, and that's circled. Everything that you have to focus, it's towards the top of the page, on the right side and on the left side. Pasuk A and Pasuk 5. And after Avram tells him that, he says, Vayomer lava eved, and the servant says, Ulai lo soveh. Maybe the girl won't want lo soveh isha lechasar harei el haaretz hazos. What if I go there and the woman that we find doesn't want to come to the land of Canaan? She doesn't want to leave her family. What should I do then? Should I bring your son back to the land from which you left? What are we going to do then? So Avram says, no, you can't do that. You can't take him there. Hashem was going to take care of it. Okay. And then so now he goes. He goes on his way. And God tells us he had great miracles. There was a very long trip, and Hashem made him do it in one day. From Canaan, from Hebron, all the way northeast to Iraq area is quite a long trip by foot or by camel. He did it in one day, less than a day. And then let us move on to verse 14. Or even, so he goes to the city, and he doesn't know how's he going to find a wife. What's he going to do? He says, I'm not sure what's going to happen. She says, well, I tell you what, it's getting time where the girls are going to draw the water by the well. And he comes to verse 14. Is let it be that the maiden to whom I shall say, please tip you over your jug so I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will even water your camels, her will you have designated for your servant, for Isaac, and may I know through her that you have done kindness with my master. So what does he do? He makes a test. He says, I'm going to come to the well. I'm going to ask one of the girls. I don't know who they are. I didn't do a background check on them. So can you give me a drink? And the one says, I'll give you a drink, and I'll also give your camels a drink. That's the one for my son Yitzchak. So the question is, how can Eliezer make such a test? For all we know, the woman who's doing this could be a terrible idol worshiper. Could be a very bad person. So what's going to help? She's going to give him water for the camels. What kind of test is that? Question number 1. The next question, if you turn your sheet back, halfway in the page, source number 1, the Talmud tells us something very interesting. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, 3 people asked questions or made requests in an improper fashion. And 2 were answered properly, even though they asked improperly, and 1 was not answered properly. In other words, 3 people, when they made a request of God, it was like chutzpah. Shouldn't have made the request. Not the way to make a request. But God answered 2 of them anyway. And 1 he didn't. Okay, what are the examples? And these are the three people. Eliezer, the one we're talking about now. Shaul, king of Israel. And Yiftach, one of the judges. Now going down to the right side, in the middle of that page, and maybe the rest of it. By Eliezer, what was the improper act? It says, let it be that the maid to whom I shall say, please tip over your jug, etc., so I may drink, and who replies, drink and I will even water your camels. Let her be the one you have designated for your servant. That was an improper request from God. That was not, what? From Eliezer. It was not proper. The Gemara saying that's not the way to do this. Okay, then it gives the example with, why? Because now is it possible that he meant to take even a lame or a blind girl as a wife for Isaac? The girl who does this. Oh, so let's say a blind girl comes in. A lame girl comes in. Or for that matter, a heretic comes in. He says, the one that's going to give you water, that's the one. What do you mean that's the one? Okay, that's the one. It could be the wrong one. Right? The one that comes. So do you know who it's going to be? No, I don't know. So if you don't know, so it could be anything. And indeed, you find the story with Yiftach, who's also one person who asked not properly. Yiftach had to go out to a battle. And he said, God, I'll tell you what, I'm going to battle. If I win, the first thing I see when I come back, I'm going to give it as an offering to you, God. And that's not proper. Because what if the first thing he'd see would be a pig? So what happened? God let him have it. He didn't see a pig, but the first thing that he saw was his daughter came out to greet him. And now he had a real problem. He promised he was going to offer that as an offering. So I'm not going to get into how he resolved that issue. It's not for now. But God said, see, you didn't ask properly, and I gave it back to you. You don't make these brazen statements. Well, I don't know to pick. Whoever comes, I'll make my own little test. Whoever gives me to drink and is going to give it to the camels to drink, that's the one. That's the one. Who knows who this is going to be? It could be a woman who's been around, who happens to like to give drinks. That's going to be yours, and that's it. That's what you're going to be, and that's it. So he was asked improperly. He asked improperly, and yet he was answered. Now that is more difficult than anything else. If he asked him, so we understand by Yiftach, God gave it back to him in a bad way. He said, you did something that's improper. The first thing that comes back to me, I'm going to give to you as an offering. Maybe it's a pig. Maybe you should have thought it through. So I'm going to bring your daughter back. Now you got real problems. But to Eliezer, for some reason, God says, okay, maybe you didn't ask the most proper way, but I'm still going to answer you. So you have to understand, why did God, number one, why did Eliezer do this? Number one, why did he do this? He's the trusted servant of Avram. And the rabbis have a lot of good things to say about Eliezer. He's the trusted servant of Avram. He was the one who went out 2 weeks ago to battle the 2.6 million troops. The only one who had the courage to go with Avram and to battle them all. He must have been a pretty good person. So why did he make such a not proper request? And on top of that, so why did God answer him in a beautiful way? He brought Rivka to him, as we know the story tells us. So that needs a little bit of explanation. Anyway, so what happens? So indeed, right after he makes this declaration, boom, right away Rivka comes out. Boom, he says, can you give me a little bit of water? He says, no, I'm even going to draw the water for you. I'll do everything. And he's just blown away from this. He's blown away. He's watching in amazement. And she's running back and forth, giving him to drink, giving the camels to drink. Unbelievable what she's doing. So then, in verse 22, it's all circled. And it was, when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a golden nose ring. Its weight was a beka, and 2 bracelets in her arms. On her arms, 10 shekels was her weight. He gives her gifts. And then in verse 23, it says, and he said, oh, by the way, whose daughter are you, pray tell me? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? In other words, he already is betrothing her. Really, the gifts were really a betrothal already. She takes the water, and right away, he betroths her. You're going to be married to my servant's son, Yitzchak. By the way, who's your family? Okay, very odd, very odd. Then she says, well, I'm the daughter of Besuel, etc., etc. We're relatives of yours, because it goes back to Nachor, who was a uncle of, who was a brother of Avram, who were relatives, second, third cousins, whatever you want to say, were cousins. And there's stuff to eat, fine. And he bows down in thanks to Hashem. Okay, now she runs back and calls her parents in. Okay. Now when you come to about verse 30, Eliezer is introduced to these guys. And now the very strange thing is from after verse 31, when they say, oh, blessed are you, come, stay here, come and we'll give for your animals, etc. The man comes in the house, they want to give him to eat, and in verse 34 it says, no, I ain't going to eat until I tell you what I'm here for. And what does he do? Now, what goes on now from verse 35 all the way, all the way to 53 and even more. He repeats the entire story word for word as to what the Torah says. He says, my master was old and he was rich, he made me swear and I went, and then I said, whoever is going to give me the water, blah, 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 and she ran, blah, 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 and goes over the whole thing. Now, the Torah could have just written at this point, and Eliezer recounted, in one verse, and Eliezer recounted everything that happened to him from when he left till this time. One verse. He says, why don't you, no, I got to tell you what happened to me. And the Torah in one verse should have said, and Eliezer told over what happened to him. And we know what happened, we just read it. No, instead the Torah repeats it, word for word for word for word for word. Repeats it. And this is very odd. And the rabbis are so struck by this, they make a statement. The Yalkut Shimoni says, Yafa sichoson shel avdei avos. So beautiful is the speech of the servants of the patriarchs. Yoser mitarashin shel banim. It's more beautiful to God than the Torah of the children of the patriarchs. Why? The story that we're learning with Eliezer, if you look at the Torah scroll, it's like 3 columns. It's long. You know why it's long? Because the Torah repeated everything that Eliezer repeated over. There's lots of words. Right? While on the other hand, certain basic Jewish law, intricate laws, Vidam Hasheretz Miramikra, and some forbidden things to eat isn't even overtly said. It's from like an extra letter in the Torah. We learn that extra things are prohibited. In other words, what is the Medrash saying? Hashem loves the talk of the servants of the patriarchs more than the Torah of the children. If you need to know a law, certain laws, God writes a lot of laws overtly in the Torah, but certain laws, it's not overtly written in the Torah. Do you have to honor your older brothers and sisters? Yes or no? Yes, how do you know it? It's not. It's hinted to from the extra word S. Honor your father and your mother. What's the S? And. The S, and. That's all your older brother. Say your older brother. Never so you just into it. It's okay. How do you know we have to go around with the Aravas? We have to go around with the Aravas on Shoshana Rabbah. There's an extra letter in the Torah. Doesn't even tell you have to do this. Real basic laws, it will hint to it. But just retelling over a story? Ooh, the servant of the master, Hashem loves it so much, he writes it all over. The whole thing getting written all over again. What is that supposed to mean? What was so great about Eliezer that we're repeating the whole story? Torah reading is long enough. It's hard enough for people to sit through the Torah reading. You add another 25 verses, and just say it. He repeated it. Finished. He told over the story. No, go over every single point of the story. Right? So we're going to be in Shul this week and say, what's going on? If you pay along, you read along, say, what's going on? Just say, this is what, and Eliezer recounted the story until this point. Done. No, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And the truth of the matter is, if you look even carefully, you're going to notice that when he repeats the story, the repetition story is not consistent with the original story in so many ways. I don't have time to get into all of that, but I'll just give you one example. Verse 39, towards the bottom of the page, it's circled. All the ones you need to know are circled. When he relates to the story, and he says, when he said to Avram, what if the girl doesn't want to come back? So it says, verse 39, and I said to my master, maybe the girl will not be following me. Right? That's repeating what was said in verse 5. Okay? Repeating over what it said in verse 5. Same thing, right? See verse 5? Yeah, but it's not the same. What did he say in verse 5?
The land.
He said, perhaps the woman shall not wish to follow me to this land. Shall I take your son back to the land from which you departed? What was repeated in 39? And I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me. That's all. What about the rest of the verse? He left that out. That's not exactly the way the story was the first time. He omitted that. How about, what did we say in the original story? He sees the girl. What's the first thing he does after he sees the girl? What does he do? He gives her the gifts. What's the second thing he does?
He has to go to the father.
He asks, where are you from? Okay, let's see how he recounts the story. Turn the page. Got to turn the page. Verse 47. Circle there. Then I questioned her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Basul, son of Nachar, whom Milcah bore to him. And I placed the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her hands. He reversed the order. He told the order different than the way it happened. Right? And there's a lot more differences. You know, if you look in verse 19. I'm sorry, verse 14. Verse 14 says, and the woman who says, well, I say to her, can I have a little bit to drink? And she says, I'll give you to drink, v'gam gmalecha ashkeh, and I will give your camels to drink. That's what that was the condition he made. He said, the girl that I asked for water, and she was, I'll give you drink, and I will give, I underlined it in Hebrew, and in English as well, I will water your camels. Right? When he repeats over the story and says the condition he made, turn the page, I'm sorry to make you flip so much, it's only one page though. In 44, he says, and if she will say to me, Gam atah say, but now look at the change, V'gam legalecha esh'av, I will draw water for the camels, not drink. He's changing what he said the first time. There's a lot of changes. So when he's repeating the story, he's not even repeating it accurately. So if you look at the, you're going to notice a lot of inconsistencies. I'm only mentioning a couple. So we have to understand, like, what's going on. You're repeating the story. At least repeat it the way it was originally. Now, there's another problem. The second time around, when he says, I said, ulai, perhaps, she won't want to come back. So look at the Midrash in source number 2. I'm sorry. At least it's only one page to turn. Okay, if I had a Chumash, you'd be flipping many pages. It said, on that, the second time, when he repeats the story, and he says to them, what if she doesn't want to go back? Look what the Midrash says. It's number 2. It says, and the servant said unto them, pre-adventure, the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. All right. Now this medrash really is in the beginning part. He says, thus it is written, Canaan. Now remember, Eliezer is a descendant of Canaan. Canaan is the son of Chum, the son of Noach. Noach had a son Chum, who had a son Canaan and other ancestors, and Eliezer is a descendant of that. And this, when Eliezer said to her, maybe she won't want to come back, the Medrash says, that, you know what he did, you know what that's like? It's like what the Torah writes about Canaan. What about Canaan? The balances of deceit are in his hand. That's a pretty bad line, isn't that? Canaan, the balances, the cheater in business. False weights and measures. Who is that referring to? It's a verse in Hosea, but who's it referring to? Canaan was Eliezer. It's referring to Eliezer, our Eliezer. A deceitful Canaanite. That's what the Medrash says. The balance of deceit are in his hand, for he sat and weighed up his daughter. Is she fit to be Isaac's wife, or is she unfit? To rob the beloved one, says the verse in Hosea, to rob the beloved one of the world, namely Isaac. So he spoke to him until he came to the word pre-adventure, like ulai, perhaps. Then I will give him my own daughter. What's going on? The Medrash is saying, when Eliezer said ulai, when Eliezer the first time said to her, ulai, maybe she won't want to go. So now the word ulai in your mind, or if you look in the Chumash, is spelled Aleph, Vav, Lamed, Yud. Ulai. Aleph, Vav, Lamed, Yud, Ulai. Later on, when the story is repeated, on verse 39, it says the word Ulai, and I underlined it, but it's not with a Vav. You see verse 39? You see I underlined the Hebrew word Ulai, fourth line from the bottom. You see there's an underline there?
No.
Fourth line from the bottom, on the Hebrew side. You can't miss it. Ulai is underlined. Now, how's it spelled? Aleph, Lamed, Vav. What letter is missing? The Vav. Vav. Aleph, Vav. You could say Aleph, Vav, or Aleph, with a kubutz underneath. You following me here? Look at the difference. Go to the top of the page. The sixth line from the top on the Hebrew side. Sixth line from the top. Look, it's underlined. The word Ulai. You see it's with a Vav?
Yes.
And now what do you see down there? Without a Vav.
Right.
Now Ulai without a Vav, if you take different letters, can spell the word Elai. Elai means to me. Ulai can mean perhaps, not, but it can be, the dots are changed. It says Elai, to me. To me. So the Medrash understands what's going on over here. When he told Avram, maybe the girl I'm going to pick down there, maybe she won't want to come, what was behind the maybe in his mind? Well, I got a daughter. Oh, do I have a daughter? She's an amazing daughter. So maybe, he didn't say it, it was unspoken, he didn't say it to Avram, but he said, maybe the girl we're going to pick isn't going to want to come. What should we do then? Hint, 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 hint. Right? I've got a really good daughter. I wouldn't have the chutzpah to say anything, but what? And he said, well, if she doesn't come, then I got my daughter. So that's why the Torah changes the ulai to a vav, to without a vav, to hint maybe, and that's what the Medrash pounces on. Remember, Medrash is just a sophisticated analysis of the text. Why did the text change the letter and drop the vav? And that's what he's saying. He was thinking for his own daughter. And to that the Medrash says, ooh, what a false businessman he was. He was attributing what he did as as bad as Canaanite salesmen. The Canaanite salesmen, what they did was they took the weights, they'd hollow out the weight inside. And either they make the weight lighter or they put heavier material to make it heavier to fool the person who's buying, depending if you're buying or selling. That's what Canaanites were noted for. And we're saying that verse, false weights and measures, who is it also referring to? Eliezer, because he was kind of falsely representing what the situation here. Very difficult to understand, because Eliezer was the trusted servant of Avram. How could the Torah be so critical of him? But we see, so Eliezer says, Avram, what is his 11? And the Medrash finishes off. We're not done. So Avram is wise to what's going on. And look how the Medrash ends. He says, thou art accursed. You are accursed. Right? You are from a klola. You're from a family of klola, of cursed people. And I am, and my son is blessed. He's a baruch. And the accursed cannot unite with the blessed. He says, in case you were thinking that maybe if I don't find a girl, it's going to be for your daughter, I want you to know, you're accursed, and my son's a blessed, and it ain't going to be no shidduch. Ooh, is that a sharp response? Avram, such a sweet, gentle, kind, loving man. What kind of response is this? A. B. What does it mean if someone is blessed and someone is cursed? What does that mean? Okay, now, so that's also interesting. And now we have to take it one step further. Now, this is a medrash. Okay, the medrash was referring to the early on, the first time Eliezer said it to Avram. However, when we go through the text, Rashi waits until the second time around, and we come to verse 39, and here's the Rashi right here on verse 39. Rashi over here picks it up. Ulai lo telech isha, perhaps it won't come, and here it's missing the vav. So this is where Rashi tells it. It is written Elai, right? Ulai, but it could be Elai. Eliezer had a daughter. He was looking for an excuse that Avram should tell him, go to the next side, that he is turning to him to allow his daughter to marry Yitzchak. Avram responds to him, my son is blessed, whereas you are cursed. And one who is cursed cannot cleave to one who is blessed. Wonderful. Now Rashi's putting this at the second time it's mentioned, because at the second time that vav is missing. So the question is, why is the message coming the second time and not the first time? Why didn't the Torah write the first time the word ulai missing a vav? When did he do it? When did it happen? When it happened, not when he repeated it. There's two things. The story happening, and now he's repeating the story, right? Now, where do you want the message to be stated that he was thinking to marry this daughter? That should be the first time around, because that's when it happened. And the Medrash really picks up on it. But where did the Medrash pick up on it? Not from verse 5, but from verse 39, where the word was written defectively. Well, why didn't God write it defectively the first time right away, so we could understand it right away in the beginning? In other words, it's written twice. When it actually happened, and when Eliezer repeats the story. When it happens, it writes ulai with a vav. With a vav, baby. When Eliezer repeats it, it's missing the vav. From the missing the vav, that's when the Medrash can pick up on the problem. First time I can't pick it up. He just said ulai, maybe, with a vav. What do you want from the guy? But when he repeated it, it doesn't have that vav. Oh, see? He meant they lie, he meant they lie, he meant that. Wonderful, good. But why didn't God in His Torah make the vav missing in the first time when it actually happened? Why did you wait for the repeat? Do you understand the question? Now, you think it's a very technical question, but it's going to teach a very deep insight in a minute. If when it happened in verse 5, he already thought that it should be for his daughter, so God should have, when God's writing the story, take the vav out, hint already then. Rashi can already then tell you that. No. We're waiting for him to repeat the story. He repeats the story without the vav. Now the Medrash said, now we say, oh, see, he meant it for himself. This was in the beginning. All right, these are a number of questions that we have over here. Why is the story repeated so much? A. B. In the repetition there are changes. C. How could Eliezer make such a request of God? Whoever comes who's going to be kind and give me water is going to be the one. What do you mean? She could be the worst non-Jewish woman in the world. She could be an idol worshiper. She could be this and that. That's how you make a test. Gemara even says it was a chutzpah to ask that way. And still in all, Hashem responded the way He wanted. Right? That's the basic questions and all the different changes. First time around, second time around, etc., etc. You notice one other thing, and it's all over the place. What's the pronoun used to describe Eliezer? You know, he ain't called Eliezer except for the first time.
Sure.
If you look at the underlines, it tells you. There's a million underlines. What is he called? You know, just in the beginning, right? His name, you know, it's interesting. Do we ever hear, is his name ever mentioned?
No.
Do you even know it's Eliezer? Well, it says his servant. In verse 5, he's called Ha'eved, the servant. In verse 9, Ha'eved, the servant. Verse 10, Ha'eved, the servant. Verse 17, Ha'eved, the servant. It's called a servant, eh? So explain to me, please, in verse 21, why it changes all of a sudden. Va'ish, and the man. Verse 26, Ha'ish, the man. Verse 29, Ha'ish, the man. Verse 30, Ha'ish, the man. Verse 32, Ha'ish, the man. Now, are we calling him a servant, calling him a man? Wait a minute. If you're not confused enough, turn to verse 33. Now, all of a sudden, Eved, he's called a servant again. All right? And then, you know, we go back to the next page, verse 53 and 54, back to Eved, servant. What's going on? Do you want to call him a servant, or do you want to call him a man? Now you say, why are you being so picky, Rabbi? God wrote every word with a lot of thought. He's first calling him an Eved, then he's calling him a man, then he's calling him an Eved. What's going on? Be consistent. Is he a servant? Is he a man? Right. Okay. So now, there's a lot of issues going on over here. And I want to hopefully not miss any of the important issues. There's so many beautiful lessons from this parsha of Eliezer. And that's why the Torah has a lot to write. The first general answer that we're going to say is, why Torah write this so much? Because the Torah can teach you a lot of laws, and that's wonderful. But until you see people living the Torah life in the way it's meant to be lived, you really can't appreciate the Torah. Torah does this law, that law, this law, that law. You know, laws are important. We're not saying they're not important. But to know a law, I can even make a hint, and you can find out what the law is. What's important is, God wrote a lot of laws, but are there people who live by His Torah? And living by God's Torah requires a human being to reach his potential. Man is created in God's image. Just like God acts like God, so too every Jew is capable of acting like God. Not like a person, but like God. A godly person. Everyone is meant to live that way. It's a great theory. Does it happen? Well, I'll tell you what, God says, when it does happen, boy, am I going to give it a lot of play in my book. When a human being can really act in a godly fashion. You know, the definition of spirituality, most people do not understand what the definition of spirituality is. People think they're spiritual because they like the arts. I'm spiritual. I sit out in the field and I meditate for 20 minutes. I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual, because I eat sushi. All kinds of, all Michigan. That's not spirituality. Spirituality is when a human being overcomes his temptations to act like a person and behaves in a godly fashion. That's the spiritual person. That's the only definition of a spiritual person. Got that? When a human being overcomes his baser nature and acts in a godly fashion, that's a spiritual person. Would you agree or disagree with that line? Yes, I meditate, but I'm a cutthroat in business. Yes, I meditate, but when someone insults me, I get offended. I'm not a spiritual person. A spiritual person goes beyond, above the mundane, basic way a rational animal behaves, and acts in a godly fashion. That is a spiritual person. Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't you say that's a good person? That's the only definition of a good person. Can you go beyond your natural tendencies and behave in a divine fashion? Right? That's what God wants. When God sees it, a human being, even if he's a non-Jew, because Eliezer was a non-Jew, if he's able to do that, that's very, very special. And that's so special, I want to have every little nuance, every little detail, because there's a world of things we can learn from this. And unfortunately, an hour and a quarter is only going to touch the tip of the iceberg today. We'd need really 50 hours to go through this properly. There's so much to learn. Well, every year, a little bit more. But God's saying, I could have written this story short and brief. God sends Eliezer out. Eliezer makes a condition. The condition is fulfilled. They let him go back. I could have written the story in 10 verses and gotten away with it pretty good. But God wrote 60 verses. Because God's saying, because here you're going to be shown, and this is what I'm going to have to spend the next time to show you. I'm showing you an example of someone who is taking that which is in theory, the Torah, and living it. That's why the whole book of Genesis really has no laws in it. Why is the whole book of Genesis written? For this purpose. To learn how to act like a mensch. And for that you need to know all the details. And now we're going to come to a specific story which is so unbelievably difficult. I'm going to explain it all. And Eliezer rises to the occasion. This is the general answer to the whole class today, but the details, the Yetzer Tov is in the details. The goodness is in the details. You used to say the devil is in the details. Here, the good is in the details. The general rule is the Torah is writing a lot because there's an incredibly profound behavior happening. Everything that God would want us to be and could have written in the Torah, it doesn't mean anything until a person lives it. When a person really lives it under extreme difficulties, the Torah gives it a lot of play. Even when the guy's telling over the story, the Torah is going to spell it all out. Because there's so much rich to learn from it. And even though the laws are important, it's important to know you have to honor your older brother and sister. I'll just give you an extra S, you'll figure it out. But if somebody is really living in this unbelievable way, we have to write every deal because there's so much to learn. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to learn all this. So let's start with one simple idea. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman of blessed memory, he writes a beautiful treatise on the following idea. And I'm just going to give you briefly, just 2 minutes, the main idea. I've in the past given a whole class on this. 2 years ago in Parshas Lech Lecha, I gave a whole class on this. But I'm just going to refresh our minds with this idea. He asks a very simple question. How could any sound, rational human being not believe that there's a creator to the world? Simple question. How could any person with a brain in his head not believe that there's a God who created the world and who is supervising everything that's going on in the world? How could anyone not believe it? And he goes through the argument of the creationistic argument, the creation by design argument. Right? And, just like you say, if anybody would tell you that this camera came by an accident, you'd say he sent him to the loony bin, right? Somebody took a bunch of metal and bolts and this and that, threw it against the wall 7 trillion times, and the 7th trillion time, look how it came out, just like that. Now, if anybody would tell me, where would we send that guy? Where would we send him? And he staked his whole life. He did 50 years of research on it. He wrote a doctoral thesis on it. What would we do? He's a loony bin. Finished. Okay? How can any scientist who said the world came from nothing, how is he any more sane than the first person I just described? The world is created with such perfect precision. The odds of this happening are just impossible odds. It cannot happen. It cannot happen. This was by an accident. It is so clear, it's mind-boggling. If somebody goes to Casino-Rama, and he does the craps table, right? 7-Eleven, right? And he gets 11 11s in a row. What's going to happen? No. The cops will have him behind chains before he gets to the 11th time. There's no way you get an 11 times in a row. It doesn't happen unless somebody's cheating. It doesn't happen by accident. We live our lives this way. You go to any casino, he's not going to get that far. By the 5th or 6th, they already know something's fishy. They've pressed the button, and these guys are looking down. They're looking at everything. And they're switching. They're looking. And by the 7th, no one gets 11 11s in a row. It just doesn't happen. The odds are like 1 trillion. It just doesn't happen. You know he's cheating. Finished. We live our lives that way. The odds of the Creator making any one thing, the liver that you have, that performs 250 functions every 5 seconds, to say that happened by an accident and the person survived until happened by accident, you have to be out of your mind to believe that. To have one liver in one body is harder than 11 11s in a row. 1,000,000 times harder than 11 11s in a row. And yet you have many sound, rational, normal people who accept this mishigas. And it's a whole world that was created perfectly, not just one little liver. To say that there's no Creator, it is lunacy. So how come people don't believe there's a God? It's a good question, no? And I don't care what you say, this is the emes. You can't argue on the emes. To say it was an accident, it happened through multi-billion, it's not possible, even with all that. The statistical impossibility, it's beyond. And the logic, there's no logic to it. You can imagine you evolved. I want to know, your heart, you didn't have a heart. How did you live till your heart came? Well, it took 7 billion years till the heart developed. Can you imagine a person with a good heart? With a little problem with the heart, you're dead in a minute. Now you don't even have a heart, and we're trying to evolve a heart? Well, somehow they lived without a heart, without lungs. So all these things that are vital for you now took billions of years to develop. How did you live until they came? It's such simple questions. And we live in a world that this is what they teach your children if you send them to a public school. This is reality. And God forbid you want to suggest there's an alternative class on creationism, that you cannot have. You can't even have it as a theory. How do you explain such craziness, says Rabbi. Do you all understand the question? And the Torah says, you shall not stray. The Torah says, do not stray after your heart in the Kriya Shema. Lo sasura acharei levavachem. Do not stray after your heart. And we say, what does that teach us? We shouldn't stray after false ideologies. Heresy. Interesting. Why doesn't it say you shouldn't stray after your brains? Isn't the heresy coming from your brain? Darwin made this up with his brain, not with his heart. When the Torah says, do not go after your heart, it says, you shouldn't believe in Darwinism. As one example. So it just says, don't go after your brain. Let's say go after your heart. So B'chanan basically says a very fundamental principle. And the principle is that the human being's mind is very much determined by what the heart wants. By what the heart wants. People are predisposed to how they should think based on what they want. And if you have certain feelings and certain desires, and if that is not what you want, then you will not accept anything that's logical. It's a very simple rule of life. It's called, don't confuse the issue with any facts. I've made up my mind already. And you know this is true so many times. People who abuse their children, people say, that's not a good thing to do. don't tell me what I should do or not believe in. Don't tell me. You're not supposed to abuse your child. But the person already made up their mind. They're going to do this. Right? If a person wants something, they will distort reality. Reality becomes distorted in the face of a person's wants. That's the only explanation how you can explain why the Arabs want to kill the Jews. There's nothing logical to it. There's nothing logical to the UN saying that Israel's such a bad country. It's only one thing. Their hearts hate the Jews. Finished. That's all. If you hate somebody, you think the way that your hatred will point you towards. Very simple. Right? So, so belief in God, is a direct function of a person either falling to their desires or not falling to desires. If you live in a world where you want to be immoral, and if there's going to be a God saying you can't be moral, so you'll come up with all the illogical reasons to say there is no God. Now, if you don't, this is what Rabbi Elchanan says. Now you say, that's Rabbi Elchanan, he's a rabbi, what does he know? So, just sure I got all my pages here. So I'll quote for you from a person who was on the other side of the coin. A secular person, not Jewish, who didn't believe in God. Right? And he wrote a short composition called Confessions of an Avowed Agnostic. And this was written by Aldous Huxley, more famously known for his book Brave New World. But he wrote a little pamphlet called Confession of a Professed Atheist. Okay, now this is at the end of his life where he's doing tshuva. You with me? I'm quoting what he writes. Not Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, because he's a rabbi, he's an axe to grind. Let's talk a professed atheist. He says, I had motives for not wanting the world to have meaning. Consequently, assumed that it had none, and was able without any difficulty to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. Do you understand what he's saying? He said the world had no meaning. There was no purpose. And I had reasons for that. And then I could have all kinds of reasons that will clarify that. He goes on. For myself, as no doubt for most of my contemporaries, all my fellow atheists, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation. The liberation we desired was simultaneously liberation from a certain political and economic system and liberation from a certain system of morality. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom. What he was basically saying is, we're a bunch of licentious people who didn't want anybody telling us not to be that way. And if religion is going to tell us not to be that way, we're going to have all kinds of reasons for debunking religion. That's what Huxley says, besides Rabbi Elchanan. But Aldous Huxley was a great atheist. And at the end of it, he said, I was a phony baloney. My desire to be such a licentious person clouded my thinking. And I refused to look at that which was obvious. And that's what belief in God is all about. Belief in God has nothing to do with your intellect. Because any moron who's 5 years old can know that there's a God. Any 5-year-old can tell there's a God. It's too obvious. It's too crystal clear. Saying, Rabbi, can the majority of people be wrong? Yes, the majority of people can be licentious and therefore they're wrong. God created man as part animal, part rational thinker. Depends which part you're using is going to determine how the other part's going to work. If you start as a behemoth, then you'll use your rational things to say the stupidest things in the name of called the holy word, science. Science, a.k.a. a way to excuse our licentious behavior. That's what a scientist is. 99% of it. They're a bunch of charlatans. They're going against the first principle of science, called observation. Scientific method. They don't agree. They don't do the scientific method. Plain and simple. And they make all kinds of theories based on nonsense. So what's the answer? Oh, they're the best. And the Torah says it. A judge shall not accept bribery because bribery will cloud your eyes. What do you think? We have to make a judgment. Did God create the world or not? Guess what the bribery is? All the pleasures of this world. That's what Rabbi Elchanan says. So that's very simple. It's not going to happen. Does everybody understand this point? It's pretty clear. Why do people say, I don't want to be religious? Because you have another issue. There's no question that living an observant Jewish life is the best lifestyle on the planet. Anybody who goes through it knows it. It's true. It's true. Less divorce, less drugs, less any of that stuff. Not perfect, but much better than everybody else. Less crime. You go to Square in New York, I want to know how many people are sitting in jail in Square. Hasidic city there. You don't need a jail. They're observant Jews. Who's going to steal from another? One, two, exception to the rule. It's clear. An observant Jewish lifestyle is the best lifestyle to live. Why do they want to do it? Because they don't want to live like moral people. Don't do whatever they want to do. Finished. I'm not blaming these people. I'm just saying these are the facts of the ground. Even religious who don't act religious, that's a problem too, because they don't want it. But that's the facts. You can't. These are undeniable facts, and I open anybody to argue with this. I'm opening the table. So why don't we want to do it? Because we got a Yetzer Hara. Because we like pleasure in life. Our hearts are somewhere else, and that's what God says. The game of Yiddishkeit is won or lost, not in the brain, but in the heart. The brain works fine. It's the heart that messes everything up. If your heart's in the right place, the brain will work automatically. Even if you just don't listen, don't take your heart out of the equation, just use your brain, it'll work fine. But when you're weaned on a lifestyle of selfishness and narcissism, well, the brain can't work very well if that's the environment that it is festering from. That's the simple understanding here. Okay. So therefore, what is this all telling us? What's the most important thing we have to be worried about? Bias. Bias. Preconceived schema. How we want things before we come to look at the truth. Bias is so strong the person themselves can't even know that they are biased. In Hebrew it's called negias. Negias. You're touched by something. There's something biases the way you think. You don't think like a normal person. Right? Many people think their grandchildren are the most intelligent people in the world. Nothing against any of your grandchildren, but you're probably all wrong, because it's mine. Right? But one thing's for sure, you're the last person to give us an honest opinion about your grandchild, because you're biased in a good way. And we're not saying you shouldn't be, but from an objective point of view, it's not accurate. We all live with biases, and God is teaching us not to live with bias. Look how terrible bias can take you. The bias of wanting to live an immoral life will make you think that black is white and white is black. That which is so obvious is a creator. Well, that's not going to work. If there's a creator, then I got a big problem. My whole life is going to change. I don't want my life to change. That's the bias. And of course, no, we have scientists, we have this and that. I mean, all cockamamie research that's already been skewed before. And nobody has enough brains to argue, because he's called a scientist. And there are a few things scientists do that are true, healing sick people. So they think everything they say is true. The healing to people is only a chazer fisel to a facade over the crookedness of what they're really trying to do, is there's no God in the world. That was the purpose of science, was to prove there's no God in the world. Because they hated the church, and the church was taka terrible. They distorted what religion was. So the backlash against distorted religion was science. I understand that. But it wasn't a backlash against authentic Judaism. And all those scientists been exposed to authentic Judaism, it wouldn't have been such a backlash. So that's the way it is. So that's the way people act. So this whole parsha of Eliezer is teaching us one lesson, but the most important lesson you have to learn: how to deal with bias. If you need to get a training lesson in bias and how to know if I have bias or I don't have bias and what bias can do to me, read this parsha. If you will read this parsha, it will tell you everything you need to know about bias, how to deal with it, how to get around it, and all the questions get around from this. But you got to remember that the bias will say that the passions of the heart will deprive a person from intellectual objectivity. Okay? And we cannot let emotions bias our intellect. And once you have a correct intellect, then you're able to live in reality. That's all. That's all. You just get rid of the biases. Get rid of the bias that I want to live a narcissistic life. If you get rid of that, the truth will come in very simple. But even little children, unfortunately, can't do that anymore, because little children are trained to be little narcissists. What do you want, Tatala? Whatever you want. Just be happy. It's your first birthday. We'll bring a pony over and have pony rides on your first birthday because I know how important it is to you. Look what you did to your kid. You're destroying your kid. You love your kid. You don't love your kid. You don't know what gvura is. We talked about that last week. Spoil them rotten. Well, that's a grandparent's right. No, it's not. And I'm a grandparent, and I could say, and I don't do it. I have my grandchild in my house. You don't think there's a temptation? I'm going to take a candy and give it to little Moshe? That's the worst thing I could do. He asked me for it. I said, you have to ask your email. Many grandparents want the easy way out. Spoil them rotten to love you. You know what? Unfortunately, there's a big Yetzer to do that, and unwillingly, you're destroying your grandchildren when you do that. When you come to this class to learn, not to just be pat on the shoulder. We're wonderful. Because, every grandparent wants to feel good. How do you feel good? Buy the kid off. That's not how you do it. You want the grandchild to love you for who you are? Sit down and learn a pasuk of Chumash with him. Teach him what Yiddishkeit's about. He'll love you more than the candy, and it'll be in a more enduring love. I don't know how to learn Chumash with my kid. Learn it. Giving them candies? That's old men in the shuls. They're the candy men. They think they're helping. They're destroying the whole shul. There's no decorum in the shul. Kids think you go to shul for candies. So don't you go to shul for? If they go to candies, they like to go to shul. They like to go to shul. Shul is good enough on itself. They don't need to have candies. But but we have biases. I want people to love me. I'm an older guy. And no one cares for me. These little kids, I give them candy. They'll come to love me. People mean well. I don't mean people don't mean well, but they don't realize what they're destroying. They're destroying. Spoiling children. It's terrible. We don't realize it. Little child on his own can understand what God is, but the parents spoil them, the grandparents, everybody spoils them. Kids all have cell phones when they're 7 years old. What do you expect? Do you expect them to believe in God on top of that? When you're feeding their animal side? It's a major problem. It's a major problem. We have to confront it. I know this is a very unpopular class. Rabbi, you're destroying all my pleasure in life. I'm trying to get you to learn to have deeper, more meaningful pleasures, not cheap, easy ones that don't take a lot of effort and don't help anybody. It feels good for now, and down the road you're destroying them. And that's the emes. That's the emes. Grandparent has to know to say, no. Then how will my grandchild love me? Find intrinsic ways of that love. Go teach him how to do something. Go teach him how to throw baseball. Teach him a life skill. Teach him how to sew. Teach your granddaughter how to sew. How to cook. That's something that they need to know. And do it together. And the time together. Talk to them. Oh, I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to... My whole relationship with my wife, I just bought her presents. I never spoke to her. Why should I speak to my grandchild? Just buying presents. That's not the way God wanted it. Take your grandchild, go for a walk. Tell them some stories. Tell them stories about great rabbis. There's so many ways a grandparent can be loved by a grandchild for authentic reasons. But what do? We spoil them. We spoil them. We mean well, but it's all there. So what do you expect a grandchild to grow up to listen to the brain and not to the heart? Tough lessons. Anyway, so let's think what's going on over here. It's not another interesting thing. So what's the grand scheme of things? I'm not going to finish the whole class today. What's the grand scheme of things? Hashem needs to get Yitzchak married off to somebody, right? That's the grand scheme of things. So let's think for a minute. If that's the grand scheme of things, and Avram's too old, and Yitzchak can't go out of Canaan, right? So Eliezer's going to be the guy who's going to have to do it, right? So why did God, years before, bless Eliezer with a daughter instead of with a son? In other words, why did Eliezer have to have a daughter so that he'd be so conflicted over his personal needs versus his master's needs? God's the one who decides what kind of kids you have. So if Eliezer is the one that's destined to have to be the messenger to bring the child, the girl back, so why did God have to give Eliezer a daughter that would create so much conflict within himself? Do you understand? We're asking questions on God's behavior, and there's answers to this. The Shem Shmuel is brilliant. It discusses this. Do you understand the question? In other words, sometimes in life we say, God, why did you give me such a hard situation to deal with now? If my master wanted me to get a girl for him, it would be a lot easier if I didn't have a daughter myself. I have to worry about my own shidduch. Now I got to worry about my master's shidduch with a complete heart. Why did God do this? Do you understand the question? The answer is because Eliezer, my dear Eliezer, you have so much potential that you're not aware of. And you're going to learn a lot about what reaching your potential is all about, B'dafka in this most difficult way. And what is this? Eliezer is a Canaanite. Canaanites, by nature, are cursed. Why are they cursed? What's a cursing? What's a blessing? I don't have time to quote you all the sources, but basically, a blessing means someone who is blessed is someone who cares about other people. Someone who is not blessed doesn't care about other people. I don't have time to give you all the sources, but there's plenty of rabbinic sources, biblical sources for that. A blessed person, God is blessed. Why is God blessed? Because He cares about everybody else. God is blessed. We say, Baruch atah Hashem, God, you are blessed. What does that mean? Because you care about others. Hashem, you only think about other people. That's God is blessed. You want to be a blessed person? A blessed person thinks about other people. That's a blessed person. You know what a cursed person is? He only thinks about himself. Right? When his great-great-grandfather, Ham, sees that Noach is drunk, right? What does Ham do to his father? He castrates him. Why would he castrate his own father? The answer is, he had 3 brothers. There were 3 brothers. They're going to divide the world in 3. But Daddy was a young man still. He was only 600 years old. He's going to live another 300 years. Daddy can have another 20, 30, 40 kids. Whoa, I don't want 25, 33% is too little already. I don't want to go down to 2%, 5%, 10%. I castrate him, there's no problems. And so Noah said, you're cursed. What does mean cursed? Cursed means to live a narcissistic life is a curse. That is a curse because you're only thinking about yourself. And that is something that is, unfortunately, has a spiritual DNA. No matter what, he was a cursed being because he had those cursed genes inside of him. But on the other hand, he was a loyal servant to Avram, which is very interesting because he was kind of going against his nature a little bit, but still was a servant, was still an eved, a servant. And the whole idea, why was Ham cursed? The curse of Noach was, and first of all, God cursed Ham. He turned him black. Everybody was white. First black man was Ham. White is a color that reflects. Black is a color that takes in. So Ham, you're the one. When I said don't have intimacy on the boat, you had intimacy. You took your own pleasures. You come out black. And when he sees what he does, he goes and castrates his own father. That's what kind of guy you are. It's black. Think of yourself only, right? And now what's the solution? What's the solution for the man who's cursed? How is he going to get out of the curse? How can the person who's narcissistic, what's the cure for it? No, God wants them to live, but to get out of the curse, how do you get the black man, we're going to call it the existential black man, because that's Ham. What did Noah say? You're going to be a servant. Because a servant has nothing of his own, he only has the master. And that was really the Torah's, not mine, the Torah. If you don't like it, go to God and go your complaints to God. God says the selfish black stereotype, the one who's the taker. I'm not dealing with skin color alone here. It's deeper than skin color. It's the nature of the Hamite, is to be narcissistic and selfish. The only way out of that is by being a servant. Means a servant only thinks about the master and never thinks about himself. And that will be your freedom, will come through being a servant. So Eliezer, as much as Avram says, you're cursed, you're still a descendant of that. But you are a servant. So we come into Eliezer, as great as he was, and he was a dedicated and loyal servant to Avram, and he was beginning to disrobe himself from that curse, because he was a very loyal servant to Avram. But you could still see that when push came to shove, it's time now for the last thing, Eliezer, the last thing I'm going to ask you, but very important. My son needs a wife. Now, if Eliezer didn't have a daughter, there'd be no test for Eliezer. Eliezer says, fine, I'll find one. But God says, Eliezer, you don't even realize how much I love you, Eliezer. You are a cursed black man. But I want you to have the possibility to get out of the curse. The only way you're going to get out of the curse, just like Avram became the first Jew, from non-Jew to Jew, by being tested, Eliezer is going to be the first cursed to go out of the curse. And how are you going to get out of the curse? First of all, be a good servant. But now it's going to come your 10th test, where your master is going to say, I need a daughter, I need a woman for my son. and it can't be a Canaanite. And Avram certainly knew, and God, who orchestrates puts all the pieces together at the right place. Eliezer spent the whole life getting rid of that curse, but still not totally free, because what does the Torah call him? Eved, 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 Eved. He's still a servant. And now Avram's telling him to do something. He's saying, listen, go find me the right wife. Now Eliezer has to fight inside of himself. What was that initial reaction? Maybe she won't want to come. And what did the rabbi say? Maybe she won't want to come because I got a daughter. That selfishness is creeping back in. Someone says, you're cursed, don't forget it, man. Now where did that come from? Bias. He's a good servant. What do you want? He's a great servant and everything Avram wanted. He's going to do. Bias still exists. You know how biased he was? What was the first thing Avram said? The first thing, my son cannot marry a Canaanite. Clear? Eliezer, are you a Canaanite? Yes. Do I have to spell it out to you? After Avram clearly says it's not acceptable. You got to go somewhere else. Well, what if he won't want to come? You could see that even though he for so long a trusted servant, bias is bias is bias. And you can't even hear the words. You can't marry a Canaanite. You're a Canaanite. So Avram has to give him straight. He says, listen, your problem is you are accursed. You're not blessed. You're trying to get better. You were getting better. You just took a big step backwards, my friend. Forget it. It ain't going to be. This is all subtly. Avram didn't say this as harshly as I'm saying it, but Eliezer had good ears. He could hear the subtleties back. So now Eliezer, God is saying, listen, I'm giving you a challenge. If you can pass this challenge, you will be redeemed. You will no longer be accursed. You will be an ish, a man. You will be the man who cares about others. You'll become a blessed one. It's going to be hard. Because what I'm asking you to do is awfully painful. You got a daughter and she was a good daughter. I'm not saying she was a good daughter. Only problem is she's a descendant of Ham and just can't take her. Finished. He can't even see the fact that you're a Hamite. Remember, Avram's white, you're black. Not going to work. It's black and white. He can't see there's even black and white. You know, go to the other ones. They're Shemites. They're still white. They're still chant. They might find somebody good over there. Okay? So Eliezer says, okay, he realizes. So now, if you send a messenger generally to a job, the guy will say, okay, I'll try my best, right? But what if it's very hard? What happens? I tried, I couldn't do it. I really tried, I really tried, I couldn't do it. But there's a difference between those who really try and those who really try and then succeed. What do I mean to say? A lot of times you do something, you try one, this way, that way, it just doesn't go. So you give up. But what if giving up is not an option? What if giving up isn't, let's say, God forbid, business deal's not worth it. You stand to lose $100,000. It's not good, but if you lose it, it's an option. Life can go on. I'm not saying it's good, but failure could be an option. What if somebody's life is in danger? Is failure an option then? No. You don't accept. You're not going to stop until the person's dead. Failure is not an option. Most of the things that God asks us to do in life, we think that failure is an option. God wants to be a Talmid Chacham. Failure is an option. I'll try hard, but if I fail, I fail. Giving a lot of tzedakah, well, it's nice, but failure is an option. All kinds of good deeds, failure could be an option. Okay, I have to find a mate for Yitzchak. I'll try. I really will try. I'm not saying I wasn't going to try. I'm going to knock on every door. But what if they say no? Failure is an option. Avram's saying failure is not an option here. Yitzchak has to get married. If he doesn't get married, there's no Jewish people. Failure is not an option. Now, how many people live that way? And I'm going to just go with all kinds of excuses. Now, Avram was telling him, you got to swear you're going to do this. It's interesting, when Yehuda went down to Mitzrayim to bring back Binyamin, remember? What did Yehuda do that allowed Yaakov to let him go? Reuben said, I'm going to go. He said, didn't let him go. But what did Yehuda do? He swore and said, I swear to you I'll bring him back, and if not, I will be cursed for the rest of my life. Ooh, Yaakov said, that I'm going to let him go down. You know why? Because when you say curse the rest of your life, that meant Yehuda said failure is not an option. I am not coming back from Egypt without him. And if it means I will die, I will die. Because failure is not an option. So had Eliezer not had a daughter, then he's a nice servant. Failure could be an option. Failure could be an option. But now that he has a daughter, and he knows he's biased, because he now knows, once Avram gave him that zug, he says, uh-oh, I'm biased. I know I'm biased. So now Eliezer has to do something that will make sure that his bias will not interfere. If you know you're biased, what are you going to do if you know you're biased about something? What are you going to do? Let's say I have to make a decision in halacha that it's my case. What am I going to do? Am I going to judge it myself? I'm going to go to a bigger rabbi. I'm not, because I know I'm biased. So if Eliezer knows he's biased, what's he going to do? I'm not going to leave it up to my brain to figure it out, because my brain will come with every excuse in the world not to have it happen. And my brain will say that failure was an option. Because I know I'm biased. If you know you're biased, when you're biased, you're lazy, you're not in a rush to do it, it's just not there. If he was a good servant, again, a good servant, I tried hard, I couldn't do it. Failure is an option. But when you know you're biased, then I can't allow my bias to interfere with what's going on here. And then he said, I got to do something that will not make me be biased. And he's wondering, what can I do? He says, what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave it up to God. God, the first girl who comes and offers water, I know she can do kindness. She's the one. I don't care. I'm not going to ask any questions. Because once I'm going to start asking questions, it's going to get hard. It's going to be this. That's it. I'm taking her. And now my bias is out. Do you understand? Is it the nicest thing to ask for God? Under the circumstances, yes. What the Gemara means, normally you don't do this with God. Normally you don't say, God, whatever comes first I'm going to take. Well, what if it's going to be a pig? What's going to be this? Normally not. And we learn from this, you don't do what Eliezer does, except when you're in Eliezer's situation, and you know you have a bias, and you know you can mess it up. You got to take yourself out of the bias. So what does he do? The first girl who does chesed, that's going to be the one. And guess what? And that made it happen. And at that point, and when Rivka comes out, and Rivka starts, she's okay, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do that, and then it says, the man was astounded. He turns from being the Eved into the man. He was happy for Avram. Wonderful, I succeeded, I made it happen. That moment said, you have now broken through from the curse. And you understand why I made it so hard for you, Elias? I gave you a daughter. You feel bad that it could be your daughter because this is going to be your training ground to break through your selfish, narcissistic, Canaanite, cursed life. Think about others more than yourself and you'll have a blessed life. And you know how I'm going to push you against the wall? Because you have your own needs. How is it for a lady who has 3 daughters who need to get married, but she still is going to help somebody else's daughter get a shidduch and spend so much time? But what about your own daughters? But you know what? I saw a good shidduch for the other girls, so let me do something for them. That's your test, to show that you're free to break out of your curse. And that's Hashem cleverly, you understand? Eliezer will say, why did God do this? Why did he give me a daughter? What did he do for? He says, that's what I give you a daughter for. To get out of the curse. You want to be an Eved all your life? I can't get you out. I got to create situations where you're going to rise above. And it's an evidence, because right away he says, well, maybe she's not going to, maybe she won't want to come. Oh, you're still acting like an Eved, eh? You still think about yourself, eh? You need to be a servant longer. But then when he makes the condition, and then he's happy that he sees the condition coming true, and he sees, I finally done the service happen. Because failure was no option. And I must make it happen. So then he becomes an ish. Wow. Breakthrough. It's all the Torah is right. Just look at the words. How do you explain? He was Eved. Now he's an ish. At that point. It's not so fast. So that, and therefore he's so trusting in God. He's so trusting. He gives her the stuff. Right. Why don't you ask who the family is? You know what? Failure is no option. If I start asking about the family, I'm going to find something wrong with the family. No. I already made the sign. That's it. I don't want any of my bias in this one, baby, because boy, I know I really don't want this to happen. So I already made this precondition. Whoever's going to be the first, that's it. And you know what? I'm trust that God's helping me here. And here, right now, chuppah kedushin. Here, take the ring, take the stuff. Oh, by the way, which family are you from? Because when I said family, oh, that family. You get asked for shidduchim. That family? Who was it? It was Basul, a terrible guy. If he would have started asking about the family, he would have said, no, that's not a good shidduch. He said, no, I still got bias here. So wonderful. So now he comes, and they bring him in. And he's the ish. But Eliezer looked just like Avram. Medrash says, not only did Lot look like Avram, Eliezer looked like Avram. I don't know how. He was black as white. I don't know. You could say maybe God made a miracle and changed his skin color to white afterwards. I don't know. It's a question. I don't know the answer to that. But the Medrash says they looked the same. And look what they say. Look what they say. The man came in. Let me just get the right words here. Where is it?
32.
No, I have to find the one I need. Oh, verse 31. He comes in and they say, Bo, they say, come, Baruch Hashem, the one who's blessed by God. Besuel, that no good for nothing lowlife. When Eliezer walks in, he can see he's a blessed man. How is he calling a Chamed a blessed man? God put it in his mouth to say he's a blessed man. So Eliezer says, oh, wait a minute. These guys are calling me blessed. Whoa, I'm a blessed man. Wait a minute. Now the Yetzirah really is working. This is the best part now. You know why? If I'm such a blessed man and I look like Avram, so why don't I take this girl and say, forget it. I think we can find a better shidduch. My daughter. Because now I'm a blessed man. Now I'm blessed. The guy said I'm blessed, and he knew he was not blessed. Now if I'm blessed, maybe what Avram said doesn't apply anymore. So he says right away, he catches himself. And what does he answer? He answers, Vayomer, Eved Avram Anochi. I'm the servant of Avram. Because saying, I got to remember what it means to be a proper Eved, that I can't think of myself here. And although they thought it was Avram, says, I'm not even going to go ahead. I want you to know, I'm not Avram. I'm nothing near Avram. And it's going to be no shidduch between my daughter and him. But let's just make sure the shidduch works out. And we're not going to look for any excuses. And every excuse that Basul made, no excuse. We got to get on with this marriage right away, 1, 2, 3. And that's why he comes back to be calling Eved. So now, when he repeats the story, now when you're going through the story the first time, you're going through the story as an Eved. But now when he looks back on the story, he's looking back on the story as an Ish. When you live through an experience as a narcissistic person, and then you grow up, and you become now altruistic, now when you look back at the story and go it over, you see it from a different perspective. And now it's the Ish looking back on his life as an Eved. And then you can see all the inconsistencies that existed in your life retroactively. And that's why when it says, Ulai, perhaps, the first time around it's written the right way, because he thinks it's just maybe. When he repeats the story, he says, Eli, he himself realized retroactively at the time now. Now that I'm telling the story over, I really was thinking that my daughter would be a good shidduch for him. The first time Eli saw it, he wasn't thinking that. He was just thinking, what if she's not going to come back? And in the back of his mind, he was thinking for his daughter. But it wasn't front and center because he couldn't admit any bias that he had. But once he became freed from that, he was able to clearly see all the pre-bias that he had. And therefore the Torah now writes, Eli, to me. Only in retrospect could he see this. Okay, left with one more question then. So I don't know if I answered them all, but you already got the idea. So how could he make such a thing to say, well, whoever draws the water, that's going to be the one? How could he do that? Because we know that the only thing, as we said, what's the real thing that holds you back from being a believer? What if she's going to be a non-Jew? What if she's a non-believer? The answer is, what does belief in God really depend on? If you're a selfish person or not. If you care about yourself and your own desires, you don't want God messing up in your life, you're not going to want to believe in God. But what midah could one have that's almost a guarantee that even if you don't know there's a God, maybe no one taught you there's a God, but if you'll know there's a God, you'll accept it. if you're a person who does chesed. Because if you do chesed in a godly way, that means you don't care about yourself. What you want doesn't matter. It's what other people want. A true Baal Chesed really cares only about other people and not himself. Once you care about other people and not yourself, then believing in a God is not going to be threatening to you. So what Eliezer was saying is this: I don't know, we could get a girl who's going to be from a house of idol worshippers, which she was from. So what is she missing? She's missing information. She's missing information. Now, if she's a selfish person, I can give her information all day long, it's not going to help. Because she's narcissistic like Aldous Huxley. But if I can see that she will, I'm going to ask her for a little bit. And not only is she going to give me a little bit, she's going to go give my camel. And he says, I'm only going to ask her if if she's going to give the water to the camel. I didn't ask her to draw the water. She says, I'm even going to draw the water. Says, my, oh my, is she a wonderful. That's godly kindness. She doesn't think of herself. Well, can you imagine? She's a 3-year-old girl. Elias a strong man. Strong man really says, give me a drink of water. She goes, get it yourself. Okay, I'll give you a little water, but I'll give you your animals. No, she gives everything. She says, wow, this girl does not care about herself. She's not focused on herself. She's focused on others. Such a person, if I will teach her about God, she's not going to have a bias. She doesn't have the bias, the preconceived bias of what's in it for me is religion. She cares about other people. So that's why he was picking the right thing. So it was the right thing. Kindness was the right thing. And by making a condition and not looking for, say, God, you have to find, that took him, his bias out of the picture. And more than that, now what all comes in one great confluence in this whole story? Number one, he finally realizes that his problem was bias. And when he realized his problem was bias, he realized that, well, what I got to look for in a right girl for him? Someone who's not going to have a bias. Who's not going to have a bias? Someone who's kindness. And more than that, now when he talks to her family, they weren't kind. Only she was the kind one. Her father wasn't kind. The other were kind. So when you're talking to people who aren't kind, I got to be careful how I speak to them, because they're not going to understand my language. What do we mean? What happened? Right away she comes, and she's astounded. Right away he gives her the gift. Then he asks where she's from, because we know why he did that. Because he wanted to get out of his bias, right? But now you can't talk to people who don't want to get out of their biases that you were doing this because you were trying to get out of your bias. They say, you're nuts. What kind of guy are you? You went and married the girl, gave her the money, and now you want to know what family she's from? You're a lunatic. You know why they're saying that? Because they live in the world of bias. They don't know what it means to try to get out of their bias. They're selfish, narcissistic people who want to kill Eliezer. You know, Basul poisoned the soup. You want to kill Eliezer, take all the money. That's the kind of deal Chevra he's dealing with. You think you're going to impress them with religiosity? That, so I wouldn't be biased. I gave her the thing. First, they're going to think he's crazy. So guess what? If you know how strong bias is, you know how to talk to other people who are biased. You got to talk to them the language that they can understand. People are biased. They're not going to be impressed with your frumkeit. You have to talk to them the way they can integrate it. And therefore, all the changes he made was so it could be people who are selfish could hear the message according to their level. You follow? If you tell a selfish person, I went and gave you the stuff first, and then we checked that, it's because you're nuts. But if you're saying, listen, I know how biased I could be, and since I could be biased, I want to not have the bias, and I believe God could help me in this and that, that's very impressive. But a guy who doesn't believe that stuff won't be impressed at all. And he doesn't want to wreck up the shidduch. Right? There's a lot of other things that he did to change that, and now you say, God says, such a person, I want to write every verse about such a guy. He did all these things. You can learn so much Torah from every line of this pasuk. That's why every line is important, to learn how to not be biased, how to overcome your bias. To know when God gives you challenges in life, and you're saying, God, why do you have to make me hurt so much that I have a daughter, and I have to make a shidduch, and my daughter can't marry him? I can't take all this. God saying, I'm just giving you an opportunity to become free. You should thank me for it. You're no longer cursed. And to get out of that curse, boy, did you have to work hard. Boy, did you have to remove all bias from your life. And now you did that, and you can find the right shidduch, and you'll be successful. You're not going to walk away and say, I tried my best, I couldn't do it. There's no such thing, I tried my best, I couldn't do it. You know what the great Hasidic master says? You say, I can't means I don't want to. If you say, I can't, it means I don't want to. If you really want to, there's no such thing as I can't. And if you take away your bias, all of a sudden you can do a lot of things. So that's what we learned from Eliezer, from an unlikely source. You figure you learned this from a Jew? No, even from a non-Jew. Why? This message is not exclusive to the domain of the Jewish people. This is a message for humanity, right? Appreciate the situation that you're in. What you think is a bad situation is your ideal situation to free yourself. And believe me, today's society, they all need to be freed. Okay? And you got to be aware of your subjectivities that you have in terms of your ideas, in terms of saying, I've done enough, I don't have to try anymore. No. You think, I did what I can, but I can't. No. There's no such thing as you did enough. Until you succeed, you haven't done enough. Right? And now you see the critical connection between kindness and faith in God. Bottom line, people who don't believe in God, what's it really rooted in? Narcissism. You're not people. You may do kindness, but you're not a kind person. You're not a Baal Chesed. A Baal Chesed could never say there's no God in this world. Because a Baal Chesed could see all the kindness in this world. A person who's not a Baal Chesed, they only care about themselves. So God isn't going to give me anything that I want. So that's critical. So therefore you can find people, therefore you try to be makar of people. What are the ones you have a better chance to kirv on? People who are genuinely Baal Chesed. That's your better, I'm not saying you should ignore others, but you only have so much time to deal with people. What's your best chance? Who could you bring closer? Better? More likely? A person who genuinely does chesed, not for ulterior motives. A genuinely person with good midos and chesed, that's the one you could work on to bring closer to Yiddishkeit. And you never know how much you can accomplish. Eliezer never dreamed that he could be a free man one day. And Eliezer walks out of this story a free man. The curse is gone. From him, not from his descendants, but from him. He walks out a free man. And he also appreciates the lower levels that other people are on, and you have to speak to them on that level. There's so many messages, and I understand why Teresa writes so much. If we can learn just a drop from Eliezer, we'd be so much happier people.